Hello, my name is Ann Lawton-Browder, and today my presentation is going to be regarding the reliability of expert explanations and opinions based on what it takes to be considered an expert through the lenses of several areas of knowledge. My real-life situation comes from a CNN article. Dr. Anthony Fauci recently stated that he was against the notion of early emergency use authorization for a coronavirus vaccine, explaining that such a step could damage efforts to develop other potential vaccines. And he also claimed that one of the potential dangers of doing this is that it would make it difficult, if not impossible, for other companies to enroll people in their trial for other potential vaccines. This was the process that I took in deriving my knowledge issue question from my real-life situation. Most of the time, we'll read something and automatically accept it as accurate or reliable based on the endorsement of experts. Essentially, I wanted to investigate the criteria that one must meet to be considered an expert and analyze if these criteria can automatically make someone both reliable and accurate. So as you can see here, not a KI would be, why is premature authorization of a coronavirus vaccine bad? Poor, to what extent can the explanations of experts be considered reliable? Intermediate, can experts be liable to bias? And good, to what extent can experts be considered reliable? So this is what I ended up with, and I did consider my intermediate question, can experts be liable to bias? And additionally, to what extent can the explanations of experts be considered reliable? But I came to the conclusion that these would really narrow my scope of what I could look at because they're both a bit too specific than what I wanted to do. I really wanted to focus on the broader question of really what makes someone an expert. In exploring this KI, I'm making the assumption that an expert is someone having, involving, or displaying special skill or knowledge derived from training or experience, as defined by Merriam-Webster. For my first development, my claim is you need to at least meet some criteria to be considered an expert. My evidence comes from Gary Klein, PhD, who suggests that although there isn't any hard criteria to be considered an expert, there is at least some soft criteria that someone must meet that's generally accepted. Klein drew from these above papers, such as Crispin and Hoffman 2016, Shanto 2015, and on suggestion by Kahneman and Hoffman. He came up with his theory on 7 criteria that determine an expert. So criteria A is successful performance. Someone calling themselves an expert must have a measurable track record of making good decisions in the past. B, peer respect. They need to be accepted by their peers. C, career/experience. An expert needs to have a number of years spent performing the task in their field. And D, quality of knowledge, such as mental models. E, reliability. F, credentials. They should have licensing or some kind of certificate. College degree would work as well in order to back them up and give them some reliability and authority to speak on their subject. G, they need to also be able to reflect on what they do. So most credible experts, it's been found that they won't hesitate to tell you when they do something wrong because their driving force is really getting what they're trying to do right. So they really want to make sure that they're accurate and reliable. My counterclaim for my first development is that expert is subjective because there isn't any explicitly defined criteria. Merriam-Webster defines expert as involving, having, or displaying special skill or knowledge derived from training or experience. Naming someone as an expert with these criteria can be problematic because number of years does not necessarily equate experience. For example, someone in the military can claim that they have 10 years of experience when all they really have is just 1 year of experience in one thing repeated 10 times. This and other vocations also don't provide opportunity for meaningful feedback, keeping someone from gaining experience and just maintaining what they have. For my mini conclusion, I came to you need to at least meet some criteria to be considered an expert. Although we have established that there isn't any hard criteria that qualifies someone as an expert, it can be said that there must be at the very least some qualifications to be considered one based on the definition by Merriam-Webster and some generally accepted criteria to be considered based off of the theory of Gary Klein, PhD. For my second development, my claim is experts can generally be considered both necessary and accurate. This first claim comes from Rule 702 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which regards the testimony by expert witnesses. It says that a witness may testify if A, The expert's scientific knowledge will be helpful to the case and improve understanding. B, the expert testimony is based on sufficient facts or data. C, the testimony is the product of reliable research, principles, and methods. And D, the expert has reliably applied the principles and methods to the facts of the case. This rule gives some reasons for which an expert might be called to take the stand in a trial. Since expert testimony can be used in court, it gives some weight to the reliability of experts and how vital their explanations can be. My counterclaim is that expert witness testimony is not always accurate, as expert witnesses have been known to lie about their experience, background, or training. Their explanations in court can also be biased by their own opinions. The federal rules of evidence and most state rules of evidence do not explicitly bar the use of net opinions in court. The expert witness testimony standards seen above do not explicitly bar net opinions either, from the federal rules of civil procedure. Again, since there are no explicitly defined hard criteria for who can be considered an expert, it creates a loophole in which it makes it easier for experts to lie or be affected by bias. For example, in a trial, an expert might be called to the stand in order to give their opinion. Since expert conclusions can be given without explaining the whys and wherefores, an individual might feel compelled to insert their own opinions about the trial, since there is no legislation preventing them from doing so. This could affect the integrity of the case because of the expert's own personal bias. It is important to acknowledge the existence of a middle ground between these two claims and say that most of the time expert explanations can be considered accurate. It is reasonable to say that most of the time expert explanations can be considered accurate, or we wouldn't have put as much faith in experts as we do. However, at the same time, it is also necessary to acknowledge that not all self-proclaimed experts really have the experience or background that they claim to do, as evidenced by the various court cases that contributed to these rules. Additionally, the fact that many experts are not prohibited from expressing their own experience and opinions at court trial, this weakens the notion of concrete expert necessity and accuracy, since they can be affected by bias. In my third development, I'm making the claim that experts are trustworthy. The evidence for this comes from a recently conducted survey which found that 86% of Americans have at least a fair amount of confidence in scientists. The counterclaim for this is that the statement that experts are trustworthy is not a universal statement, or else the number would be 100%. There are some groups that do express doubt in the trustworthiness of experts. Another recently conducted survey found that a partisan divide does exist in the public's opinion of experts. 43% of Democrats say that they have a great deal of confidence in experts, while only 27% of Republicans say that they do. This definitely creates an issue with the above statement because it shows that there isn't a universally accepted belief that experts are trustworthy. In this particular case, I feel as though a middle ground should be acknowledged between the claim and counterclaim. While most Americans do have faith in experts, it's important to acknowledge the implications of the opinions of the groups that disagree, based on these studies, and make the conclusion that most Americans consider experts to be trustworthy. Based off of my three developments, I came to these three mini conclusions. Firstly, that you need to meet at least some criteria to be considered an expert. Secondly, most expert explanations can be considered accurate. And thirdly, most Americans consider experts to be trustworthy. Based off of my three developments, pieces of theoretical evidence, and many conclusions, my final conclusion that I've reached is that to a great extent, experts can be considered reliable. In making my conclusion, I'm assuming that although there are pieces of evidence against it, they are not as significant as the evidence that I have found in favor of it. My conclusion does have several flaws, based mainly on the fact that there is some evidence that negates the reliability of experts, although I do still feel that my conclusion is backed with enough significant theoretical evidence to be accepted. My conclusion is significant in relation to my real-life situation because it shows that Dr. Fauci is justified in having his opinions about the premature introduction of a coronavirus vaccine based off of his established reliability as an expert. My knowledge issue question and investigation can connect to any RLS where experts are cited or their opinions are used to strengthen an argument. For example, a recent article that cited health experts for stating that the upcoming colder weather, the flu season, along with reopened schools and pandemic fatigue are a recipe for increased COVID cases. And secondly, a recent New York Times article in which experts warned that existing water safety rules are not suitable to a world where wildfires are currently destroying more residential areas than ever before. My conclusion can be applied to these cases because they In each article, experts were consulted. And these are my works cited. Thank you for listening.